Chapter 2 of The State of Nature by Jean Locke. To understand political power aright and derive it from its original, we must consider what a state all men are naturally in, and that is a state of perfect freedom to order their actions and dispose of their possessions and persons as they think fit, within the bounds of the law of nature, without asking leave or depending upon the will of any other man. So what Jean Locke is trying to say here is that the correct explanation or the correct way to understand political power. What is political power? How should it be? How should it be organized by the people? How should it be implied? What is necessary is to understand the natural state of नेचर दैट मैन आर इन. तो वो अपनी जितनी नेचुरल सेटिंग में होंगे उसके बाद हम समझ पाएंगे कि उनकी नेचुरल सेटिंग क्या है, मैन को किस चीज़ की ज़रूरत होती है, किस चीज़ की ज़रूरत होती है, उन्हें किस टाइप के रूल्स एंड रेगुलेशंस चाहिए और किस टाइप की सिचुएशन डेवलप होनी चाहिए. ओके, वी हैव दीज रूल्स एंड लॉज एंड रेगुलेशंस ताकि हर चीज़ एक प्रॉपर प्लेस में हो. बट व्हाट इज़ दैट प्रॉपर प्लेस? वो क्या तरीका है जिसको हम मतलब वो क्या सेटिंग है जिसको अचीव करने के लिए वी हैव सेट ऑल दीज लॉज एंड रेगुलेशंस is the natural state of nature. So in that state of nature there are few things that are important, and that is perfect freedom to order their actions. Freedom के बारे में बात जो है वो हमारे previous video में Kant was also doing when he was talking about enlightenment, and here when Locke is talking about the the state of nature, the natural state of nature, he also talks about freedom, that freedom is necessary because where there is freedom there is no bondage, of course, and then there is the ability and the power of one person to do anything that he or she thinks fit and dispose of their possessions and persons as they think fit. That means again freedom according to their own senses, like whatever they want to do or want to have, within the bounds of law of nature. So of course even when they're talking about freedom, that he doesn't mean that a person has the freedom to go and just kill anybody he or she wants. Not that kind of freedom which is within the bounds of the law of nature. So that kind of freedom which has its own limitations, which again was being talked about Immanuel Kant, that there are some limitations and those limitations are also necessary, without asking leave or depending upon the will of any other man. Again, not hindering the other person's freedom, not hindering the other person's will, that kind of freedom. So you see, we're talking about freedom, Locke is talking about freedom here, but there's so many different limitations here. Okay, that the freedom should be within the bounds of nature, it should not be hindering other person's will, etc. A state also of equality wherein all the power and jurisdiction is reciprocal, no one having more than other, there being nothing more evident than that creatures of the same species and rank, promiscuously born to all the same advantages of nature and the use of the same faculties, should also be equal one amongst another, without subordination or subjection, unless the lord and master of them all should, by any manifest declaration of his will, set one above another, and confer on him by an evident and clear appointment an undoubted right to dominion and sovereignty. So very simple words they're talking about. Okay, in very simple words Locke is trying to explain a state of equality. Okay, all power and jurisdiction is reciprocal. Reciprocal means that all the justice, all the power that you are giving to the other person is also giving it back to you. It is bouncing back to you, so that there's like a relationship of mutual power and mutual jurisdiction between two people, and no one has more power than the other person. All of them have equal power, and the creatures of the same species and rank are treated together. They also enjoy all the same advantages of the nature. Okay, so like nobody is deprived of any facilities, nobody is deprived of any advantages, everybody has the same opportunities, have the same access to resources, everything the same. Okay, and only if the sovereign, the master himself, the Lord himself sets one of them or some of them apart with some extra powers and anything like that, Until then, everybody is equal, has to be treated equally, and has to be given the same advantages. This equality of men by nature, the judicious Hooker looks upon as so evident itself and beyond all question that he makes it the foundation of that obligation to mutual love amongst men on which he builds duties they owe one another, and from whence he derives the great maxims of justice and charity. His words are, the like natural inducement hath brought men to know that it is no less their duty to love others than themselves, for seeing those things which are equal must needs all have one measure. If I cannot but wish to receive good, even as much at every man's hands, as any man can wish unto his own soul, how should I look to have any part of my desire herein satisfied, unless myself be careful to satisfy the like desire, which is undoubtedly in another other men weak, being of one and the same nature, to have anything offered them repugnant to this desire must needs in all respects grieve them as much as me, so that if I do harm, I must look to suffer, there being no reason that others should show greater measure of love to me than they have by me showed unto them. My desire, therefore, to be loved of my equals in nature, as much as possible may be imposed upon me a natural duty of bearing to them were fully the like affection, from which relation of equality between ourselves and them that are as ourselves, what several rules and canons natural season had drawn for direction of life, no man is ignorant. What is one thing with this is that whatever they're talking about, whatever Locke is talking about, is very simple. We already know all of this. We have been taught of this from from since we were children. These are some of the most basic manners basically that he's talking, and when very simple ground rules, basic foundation that he's talking about. Like, if you want to have power, you have to give power. Everybody is equal, everybody has to be treated equally, everybody has to have the access to the same kind of advantages, same kind of facilities, and same kind of resources. Everybody has to be equal, all of that stuff. Okay, so like you're talking about Hooker also, who's another philosopher who also talks about something, and even he talks about the same thing, that there needs to be obligation to mutual love. Now, obligation means you should have a sense of duty, a sense of a sense of fulfillment towards it, that okay, this is something that I must do, I need to do. That is your obligation. Like, it is your you oblige to follow the traffic rules. It is your obligation that you must follow them, you must do them. So every person should have that obligation to mutual love, that loving each other amongst men like brothers, like friends, on which he builds the duties they owe one another. So of course, when we have a mutual love between two people, like when we love, like for example, we love our parents, so we automatically build a duty towards them, that we have to take care of them, we have to help them, we have to listen to them, be obedient to them. Okay. So Hooker also derives his writing, his piece of his one thing on this thing only, on this thing, that men must love another. Okay. So what Hooker says is, the like natural inducement had brought men to know that it is no less their duty to love others than themselves. For seeing those things which are equal must needs all have one measure. So Hooker also says that men should come to know about this, that as it is their duty to love themselves, it is also their duty to love the other person. For seeing those things which are equal must needs all have one measure. Everything should be equal, should have one single measure. If I cannot but wish to receive good, so if I want good from other person's hands, I need to give them good. Okay, like anything that I want onto my soul that should happen to me, I should give it to the other person. Okay, and how I look that my desires should be satisfied, and how they are satisfied, I should also take care about the other person's desires, to satisfy them too, to help them satisfy them too. And which may be like some people may not be able to fulfill their own desires, there may be some problems, there may be something, so it is our duty to help them eventually fulfill their goals, achieve their goals, satisfy their desires, which is undoubtedly in other men weak, of the desires which are not fulfilled in the other people, being of one and the same nature, to have anything offered them repugnant to this desire must needs in all respects grieve them as much as me, so that if I do harm, I must look to suffer. So if I do harm, if I do harm or hurt any other person, even I must look forward to, not look forward to, but even I should expect suffering then in back, because I have hurt, if I have hurt the other person, I will receive the hurt also. So I should be very much expecting it. As much as possible may be imposed upon me a natural duty of bearing to them were fully the like affection. So it is a natural duty. This is not something man-made, human-made, that is a concept made by some person. It is a very natural thing, and it is like your duty. It's a natural duty to you to love the other person, to like the other person, to help them achieve their goals, fulfill their desires, and give them what we want in return. If what we want is love, we have to give out love. But though this be a state of liberty, yet it is not a state of license. Though man in that state have an uncontrollable liberty to dispose of his personal possessions, yet he has not liberty to destroy himself or so much as any creature in his possession, but where some nobler use than its bare preservation calls for it. The state of nature has a law of nature to govern it, which obliges everyone, and reason, which is that law, teaches all mankind who will but consult it, that being all equal and independent, no one ought to harm another in his life, health, liberty, or possessions, for men being all the workmanship of one omnipotent and infinitely wise maker, all the servants of one sovereign master, sent into the world by his order and about his business, they are his property, his workmanship, they are made to last during his, not one another's pleasure. So you see, Locke is talking about a god-like creature here, that there is one master who has given, we all are his property, we all are following his orders, we all are doing his business. So there is one master, and that master has godlike properties. Until now we know this. Okay, let's see ahead that whether he specifically says God or not, well, you'll get to know it soon. But yes, we see here that there is a talk about a creature, something like God, that we are all his property, we're following his orders, everything. And in this state of liberty, okay, we have the liberty to do certain things, we have the freedom to do certain things, but that liberty and that freedom does not include the liberty to destroy ourselves, and also not destroy other people or other creatures, other animals, nobody. We have liberty, we have power, but we don't have the liberty and power of destruction. We cannot destroy anybody else's desire. We have to love the other person, treat them equally, and no matter who is in our possession or not, we don't have to right over them to destroy them. Okay, and how we want ourselves to be treated is how we should be treating the other people. Okay, why? Because the state of nature has a law of nature to govern it. Okay, now there is a difference between the state of nature and the law of nature. The state of nature refers to a situation, to a circumstance, to setting, basically, okay, of how everybody has to be treated, how everybody has to follow their duties, comply with their duties, etc., etc. But the law of nature is what brings us into the state of nature. Okay, the state and law, a very, very simple demarcation, but sometimes very confusing, especially ahead, because we're going to have a lot of law of nature, state of nature, law of nature, state of nature. So please don't get confused between the two. These are not the same things. It is the law of nature that brings one into the state of nature. The state of nature is a situation, it's a setting, and the law of nature, it's a rule, it's a law. Okay, so it is the law of nature that governs us, that we have to follow, that we have to oblige by. Okay, and it teaches all mankind that being all equal and independent, not to harm other people in his life, health, liberty, freedom, possessions. Why? Because it is the same law that teaches us. It is the maker, we're following his order, we are his business, we are his property, we are doing what he has given us. man, we are his workmanship to last during his, not one another's pleasure. Very important. We don't have the right to take away another person's life just as it is, without any reasons, because we have to live by his pleasure. Until he wants us to live, we have to live by, and not our pleasure, that we want to live until this time, so we live and then we die, or we kill somebody else if we don't want them to live. We have to live by his pleasure. And being furnished with faculties, sharing all in one community of nature, there cannot be supposed any such subordination. Subordination means, up, down, a difference between two people of the same species, same rank. And there should not be any subordination, that one can authorize the killing of another, the destruction of another, that we are following one's order to destroy another person. That kind of subordination should not be there. And everyone, as he is bound to preserve himself and not to quit his station willfully, so by the like reason, when his own preservation comes not in competition, ought he as much as he can to preserve the rest of mankind, and not unless it is to be justice to an offender, take away the impair the life, or what tends to preservation of life, the liberty, health, limb, or goods of another. Now, exactly to the answer to your question, while we were reading this, you must be thinking that how is this possible? How is this like we don't harm another person, we don't take away another person's liberty, we just love another person, we help them fulfill their desires, etc., etc. Here comes the deal. Okay, we have to do all of these things. As we are preserving ourselves, we have to preserve the rest of the mankind. But there are certain cases where the liberty of another person can be taken away, and that is when there is an offender. An offender of what? Offender of the law of nature. If there is somebody who is not following the laws of nature, who is trying to destroy the other person, take away another person's liberty, not respecting, loving another person, or doing something wrong to another person, that person is an offender by this, offender of the law of nature, and that person has the right to be punished. And the other person who he has offended has the right to punish this offender, because the offender has taken away something, has done something to the offended. That should not be done according to the law of nature and in the state of nature. And that all men may be restrained from invading others' rights and from doing hurt to one another, and the law of nature be observed, willeth the peace and preservation of all mankind. The execution of the law of nature is in that state that put into every man's hands, whereby every one has a right to punish the transgressors of that law to such a degree as may hinder its violation. Now comes the deal, that if one person has been offended, if one person's rights, if one person's liberty is taken away, rights are offended, violated, then that person has the right to punish the offender, to punish that person who has hindered its violation. For the law of nature would, as all other laws that concern men in this world, be vain if there were nobody that in the state of nature had a power to execute that law and thereby preserve the innocent and restrain offenders. So that it is necessary, for the law of nature also requires it, that if the laws of nature has to be followed, there has to be someone who takes care of the innocent, and who also punishes the offenders who do not follow the laws of nature. Because if that doesn't happen, then everybody one day will start just offending the law. Nobody will care for the other, because that person will just look for himself or herself. And if anyone in the state of nature may punish another for any evil he has done, everyone may do so. Now you notice one thing here, how Locke is moving step by step. First of all, he establishes universal brotherhood, universal love, helping each other, equality, equal distribution of resources, and all that stuff. So this is something very basic, very founding, but something of a utopian thing. Okay, now the second step he moves towards, that what has to be done if this is not properly followed. If universal brotherhood, universal love for each other, which does seem like almost impossible to achieve, of course there would be offenders, and how then those offenders have to be treated. And he starts with one man. There is one man who has offended the other person, and that other person who has been offended has all the right to punish the person who has offended him. And from one man he moves to all of humanity. Okay, that if one man has the power to punish the violator, then everybody else has, everybody carries that much power with him to impart a punishment as much as he is being offended. Okay, in the state of perfect equality, where naturally there is no superiority or jurisdiction over one another, what any may do in prosecution of that law, everyone must needs have a right to do so. So of course, in a state of perfect equality, where it's just perfect, everything is perfect, no person holds a jurisdiction over one another, no superiority over one another, nobody can punish anything just like that. But only in a state of perfect equality, if anywhere or the other the liberty is violated, then comes in the right to punish the offender and the violator. And thus, in the state of nature, one man comes by a power over another, but yet no absolute or arbitrary power to use a criminal when he has got him in his hand according to the passionate heats or boundless extravagancy of his own will, but only to retribute to him so far as calm reason and conscience dictate what is proportionate to his transgression, which is so much as may serve for reparation and restraint. So when one man comes by a power over another, okay, how does that man get power over another? When the other person offends the other person, the offender immediately gets the power to punish the offender. Okay, but then again, the punishment should be in accordance to the offense done. Okay, the more serious, the more severe the offense done, the more severe can be the punishment. Why? Because there should be a proportion to his transgression, which will teach him, which will restrain him for further offense, from further offense, that not committing offense any further. So the punishment should be in proportion to the offense done. For these two are the only reasons why one man may lawfully do harm to another. What is that we call punishment? Okay, so these two are the only reasons. The first is that if the person has offended the other person's liberty, the offender has all the right, and secondly, the offender can only punish as much as according to the offense committed. In transgressing the law of nature, the offender declares himself to live by another rule than that of reason and common equity, which is that of measure God has to set to the actions of men for their mutual security, and so he becomes dangerous to mankind. The tie which is to secure them from injury and violence being slighted and broken by him, which being a trespass against the whole species in the peace and safety offered provided for by the law of nature, every man upon the score by the right that he had to preserve mankind in general may restrain, or where is necessary destroy things noxious to them, and so may bring such evil on any one who had transgressed that law as may make him repent of doing it, the doing of it, and thereby deter him, and by his example others from doing the like mischief. And in this case, and upon his ground, every man hath a right to punish the offender and the execution of the law of nature. So the person who punishes the other person for offending him, for violating him, has to give a punishment in accordance to the offense done, offense committed, and that punishment should be one which also teaches other people to not repeat the mistake. It should be like that when a person sees the person being punished, the person immediately learns to not commit the mistake again. Okay, and upon his core in this law of nature, according to the law of nature, in this state of nature, a man has the right to preserve the mankind. Okay, and that preservation comes in by punishing the offenders. I doubt not but this will seem a very strange doctrine to some men, but before they condemn it, I desire them to resolve me by what right any prime state can put to death or punish an alien for any crime he commits in their country. It is certain their laws, by virtue of any sanction they receive from the promulgated will of the legislature, reach not a stranger. They speak not to him, nor if they did, is he bound to hearken to them. Here he is talking about that you cannot punish an alien, and by an alien means a stranger who does not belong to the particular territory. Okay, because they do not, what how he is trying to justify him is, they speak not to him. We do not speak to a stranger. The stranger does not know our laws, our legislature. Then how can we punish that stranger if he by some means break law? Because that stranger is unknown to the laws of that particular territory. The legislative authority by which they are enforced over the subjects of that commonwealth had no power on him. Okay, so those who have the supreme power of making laws in England, France, or Holland are to an Indian, but like the rest of the world, men without authority. So a man from England has no authority over a man of from India, no matter how big an authority he is in England himself. Okay, so you are in power in England, okay, but you don't have power over a person from India. Why? Because an Indian is a stranger to a French person, okay, to a British person, and the laws of England and France are to be followed only by the French and the British. If an Indian does not follow them, the French, the British do not have the power to punish that Indian, but like the rest of the world, men without authority. And therefore, if by the law of nature every man hath not a power to punish offences against it, as he soberly judges the case to require, I see now not how the magistrates of any community can punish an alien of another country, since in reference to him they can have no more power than what every man naturally may have over another. So naturally, no man has any power over over another person. A man only gets power when the other person commits an offense, because then that person has the power. The offender, the offended has the power over the offender to punish him or her. So naturally, there nobody has any power over another until and unless. So that's how. And anybody who does not belong to the particular territory does not have the power over others, and others don't have power over him. Besides, the crime which consists in violating the laws and varying from the right rule of reason, whereby a man so far becomes degenerate and declares himself to quit the principles of human nature and to be a noxious creature, there is commonly injury done, and some person or other or some other man receives damage by his transgression, in which case he who had received any damage has, besides the right of punishment common to him with other men, a particular right to seek reparation from him that hath done it. And any other person who finds it just may also join with him that is injured and assist him in recovering from the offender, so much as they make satisfaction for the harm he had suffered. Okay, now let's see that there is a person who has quit the principles of nature, who declares themselves that not of this country, not of any other country, I do not follow the laws of nature. Now, of course, the person will not make such a declaration, but it will be very much evident by his actions that if the person stops following the laws of nature, does not obey by the laws of nature, in that case, anybody he harms from any other country has the right to punish him. Before, earlier, we're talking about territory. Our territorial boundaries prevent having power over another person. But if that person had just, quit all the laws of nature, is providing any common injury to a lot number of people, the offended has all the right to punish the person, and also any other person who wants to join the offended to punish the person can join him. So Okay, so that justice can be done. As much harm as the offender has provided to the person, one person or many other people can come together and punish the person to get a reparation of that offense. From these two distinct rights, the one of punishing the crime for restraint and preventing the offense, which right of punishing is everybody, and the other of taking reparation, which belongs only to the injured party, comes it to pass that the magistrate, who by being magistrate hath the common right of punishing put into his hands, can often, where the public good demands not the execution of law, remit the punishment of criminal offences by his own authority, but yet cannot remit the satisfaction due to any private man for the damage he has received. Now we're talking about the two rights that are being talked about, the one of punishing the crime and the other of taking reparation. So punishment of the crime means that a crime has been done and you just punish the person in some way or the other. And of course the other of taking reparation means that whatever kind of for example, just a very vague example off the top of my mind, it can be, for example, if there's a person A who has stolen 10,000 rupees from another person's house, say person B. Now the punishment of the crime would be that person A has to spend 3 years in jail. Okay, that would be a punishment. But reparation would be that person A has to pay back 10,000 rupees to person B, or not even if pay back, then work at person B's house until and unless he makes that 10,000 rupees. Work worth rupees 10,000 salary. So that would be reparation. Reparation is basically compensating for what damage has been done. Okay, so there are two distinct rights here. They're two different things. One is reparation, taking back taking compensation for what wrong has been done, and punishment is just punishment. You don't get back anything, you're not compensated for anything, but you're just punishing the other person. Comes it to pass that the magistrate, who by being magistrate hath the common right of punishing put into his hands, can often, where the public good demands not the execution of the law, remit the punishment of criminal offences by no authority, but it cannot remit the satisfaction due to any private man for the damage he has received. So a magistrate who has the power, a magistrate will be of course a person who common people have put their faith and power in, that the magistrate in cases preside over and have a very fair and unbiased jurisdiction for that cases. So what happens is that magistrate, even if that magistrate punishes the offender, he or she can remit the criminal offenses. He or she can remit the punishment of criminal offenses, but cannot remit the satisfaction. Okay, so a man who has received a damage when he has been wronged and the wrong does not happen to the other person, of course the person is unsatisfied. So that he who had suffered the damage has a right to demand in his own name, and he alone can remit. So only that person, even in the case of a magistrate, even in the case of a governing body, the person who has been wronged has the right to ask for something that he wants, that can satisfy himself, that can satisfy him for whatever wrong has been done to him. And of course whatever he asks for has to be in boundaries of the crime committed and limit to the crime committed in proportion to the offense done. The damnified person has this power of appropriating to himself the goods or service of the offender by right of self-preservation, as every man has the power to punish the crime to prevent its being committed again, by the right he has of preserving all mankind and doing all reasonable things he can in order to that end. So for example, if the person wants that, okay, this person has hit me once, I want to take his car for that, or I want to take this thing that is that I like very much of his. Now of course that thing will be in accordance to the crime committed. So in that case only that person who has been wronged has the right to take reparation for that thing. And thus it is that every man in the state of nature has a power to kill a murderer, both to deter others from doing the like injury by the example of the punishment that attends it from everybody, and also to secure men from the attempts of a criminal who, having renounced reason, the common rule and measure God had given to mankind, had by the unjust violence and slaughter he had committed upon one, declared war against all mankind, and therefore may be destroyed as a lion or a tiger, one of those wild savage beasts with whom men can have no society nor security. So here Locke even gives the power to kill a murderer. If a person has killed another person, or killed a dear one of another person, the person has all the right to kill the murderer. Why? Because this is the level of crime that has been committed by the offender. And upon this is grounded that great law of nature, whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. So whoever has shedded another man's blood, his blood can also should be shed. And Cain was so fully convinced that every man had a right to destroy such a criminal that after the murder of his brother he cries out, "Every one that findeth me shall slay me." So plain was it writ in the hearts of all mankind. By the same reason, may a man in the state of nature punish the lesser breaches of that law? It will perhaps be demanded with death. I answer, each transgression may be punished to that degree and with so much severity as will suffice to make it in all bargain to the offender, give him cause to repent, and terrify others from doing the like. So now he's asking another question, that by the law of nature, by the reason, in the state of nature, should the punishment of every crime be death? To this, Locke replies that no. The punishment of the crime should be according to the degree of the crime committed. Okay, so that, and what should the punishment be? How should the punishment be? The punishment should be in such a way that first, the offender learns not to repeat it, and second, others get a lesson to not commit the crime. Others are terrified when they see that, okay, this is the punishment we are going to get, we should not be committing it. Okay, so the punishment has two characteristics with it, that the person does not repeat his mistake, and the others learn from it to not commit the crime ever. And death is not the appropriate punishment for every crime committed. Okay, if the punishment has to be to a murderer, then death can be done according to Locke. Death can be a punishment. But to other offenses, the punishment should be according to the degree of and the severity of the crime committed, of the offense committed. Every offense that can be committed in the state of nature may in the state of nature be also punished equally. For though it would be beside my present purpose to enter here into particulars of the law of nature or its measure of punishment, yet it is certain there is such a law, and that too as intelligible and plain to a rational creature and a studier of that law as the positive laws of commonwealths, may possibly plainer, as much as reason is easier to be understood than the fancies and intricate contrivances of men following contrary and hidden interest put into words. For truly so are a great part of the municipal laws of countries, which are only so far right as they founded on the law of nature by which they are to be regulated and interpreted. To the strange doctrine viz. that in the state of nature every one has the right executive power of the law of nature, I doubt not but it will be objected that it is unreasonable for men to be judges in their own cases, that self-love will men make partial to themselves and their friends, and on the other side, ill nature, passion, and revenge will carry them too far in punishing others, and hence nothing but confusion and disorder will follow. And that therefore God had certainly appointed government to restrain the partiality and violence of men. Now you see that how a gradual development is taking place. First, Locke talks about a state where there is no crime. Then he talks about if one person has offended the other person. Then he talks about all the people and how all the people have right in cases where they have been offended. Now he talks about that if one person has been offended, you see that one person will be biased. Okay, for example, that one person will not be able to judge properly because that person will have a feeling of revenge for the other person. His emotions will be very much raised at that time, and in such a case there needs to be a civil government who will very impartially, very unbiasedly punish the offender. and that punishment will of course be in accordance to the crime and the offense committed. Okay, so a person cannot be a judge of his own things. A person cannot judge other person for doing something to himself, because of course that person will think that okay, whatever has been done to him was very very wrong, even if the punishment was not that even if the crime was not that severe. Okay, I shall desire those who make this objection to remember that absolute monarchs are but men, and if government is to be the remedy of those evils which necessarily follow from men being judges in their own cases, and the state of nature is therefore not to be endured, I desire to know what kind of government that is, and how much better it is than the state of nature, where one man commanding a multitude has the liberty to be judge in his own case, and may do all his subjects whatever he pleases without the least question or control of those who execute his pleasure. So a government or a place where one person himself takes the punishment, or gives the punishment for the crime committed to himself, that is not a proper government. That is not a proper state of nature. Why? Because the person will see no bounds. The person will just punish according to himself. Okay, so a person cannot be his own judge, the judge of the wrongdoers of committed to himself. He will not be he will not be unbiased, he will not be impartial, and he will not have a control on himself. And that is why there needs to be a civil government who will take care of all this. It is often asked as a mighty objection, where are or ever were there any men in such a state of nature, to which it may suffice as an answer at present, that since all princes and rulers of independent governments all through the world are in a state of nature, it is plain the world never was nor never will be without members of men in that state. I have named all governors of independent communities, whether they are or not in league with others, for it is not every compact that puts an end to the state of nature between men, but only this one of agreeing together mutually to enter into one community and make one body politic. Other promises and compacts men may make one with another and yet still be in the state of nature. The promises and bargains for truck, etc., between the two men in Sardinia, in or between a Swiss and an Indian in the woods of America, are binding to them, though they are perfectly in a state of nature in reference to one another, for truth and keeping of faith belongs to men as men and not as members of society. So there always are men in state of nature. From the beginning there have been men in state of nature, and between two parties, between two communities, there needs to be a very proper agreement, a proper thing. When there has been any kind of exchange being taken place, any kind of contract being put on, so there has to be proper rules and regulations for that, because people are entering into an alliance by the by the likes of every person of that community. To those that they say there were never any men in the state of nature, I will not oppose the authority of the judicious hooker, where he says, the laws which have been hitherto mentioned, that is the laws of nature, do bind men absolutely, even as they are men, although they have never any settled fellowship, never any soul and agreement among themselves what to do or not to do. But for as much as we are not by ourselves sufficient to furnish ourselves with competent store of things needful for such a life as our nature doth desire, a life fit for the dignity of man, therefore do supply these defects and imperfections which are in us, as living single and solely by ourselves, we are naturally induced to seek communion and fellowship with others. So this is a very natural thing, and the natural state of nature, the law of nature, the state of nature has been one of a kind, wherein it directs people to come together, to form a community, to be into the fellowship of every other person, to be together, to perform and to build a common set of laws, a common set of governing body for everyone. This was the cause of men uniting themselves as first in politic societies. But I moreover affirm that all men are naturally in that state and remain so till by their own consents they make themselves members of some politic society, and I doubt not in the sequel of this discourse to make it very clear. See, all the men very naturally in the very first of cases come together to form a community, and this very forming of a community, forming of a government or a civic body is a very natural thing. It is a part of law of nature, it is a part of state of nature.